Please, sir, let me in. I need your help.
I wasn't surprised when my wife Claire told me her childhood friend Lauren has a phobia of trick-or-treaters. I don't know if phobia is the right word, but at the very least I'm talking about irrational but genuine fear. I wasn't surprised, not because it isn't strange. It is. But I'm used to people with unusual fears. Claire herself is afraid of the Game of Thrones theme music. She loved Game of Thrones when it was big, but we always had to mute or fast forward through the opening credits. My sister is scared of fish. My aunt covers her goldfish tank with a blanket every time my sister visits, because the sight of their scaly bodies puts her on edge. So I didn't think anything of it when Claire suggested we rent a cabin in the middle of nowhere over Halloween, so Lauren wouldn't be in when the local trick-or-treaters descended. We could have just spent the evening in a pub or restaurant, but we were all stressed and needed a break. Claire's work as a school teacher was getting her down because there was a particularly disruptive student in her class. I'm a graphic designer and was dealing with a demanding client I knew I shouldn't have taken on in the first place. And Lauren had recently launched her own cake decorating business. She loved her work, but Claire suspected the added pressure and responsibility of running her own company was getting to her. We drove out into the woods on the morning of October 31st. I made sure we had several spare tires, an extra tank of gas, plus all the tools, flares and bottled water we could ever possibly need. Claire said I was being paranoid, but I've seen enough horror movies to know it's better to have and not need than to need and not have. But as it turned out, we reached our destination without incident. Lauren gasped in amazement when we pulled into the driveway. The cabin exceeded our expectations. It wasn't the spooky, run-down rental I feared it might be. Despite being miles from the nearest neighbor, it was well kept and didn't seem creepy at all. The inside was homely and well furnished. It didn't take me long to get the log fire roaring. Claire had come through, as usual. It was me that tended to book hotels that looked acceptable online but were full of bed bugs in real life. The women cracked open the bottle of wine while I manned the barbecue. It was warm for late October, and we were able to sit outside while we ate, drank wine and caught up. The air was scented with autumn leaves and pine needles. We couldn't have hoped for a better day. We retreated indoors when it started getting dark. Claire poured more wine, and Lauren searched for something to watch on TV. We were arguing over whether Keeping Up with the Kardashians is iconic or trash when the doorbell rang. We looked at each other in unsettled surprise. We were a long way from civilization. It didn't make sense that anyone would be out here. My first thought was perhaps someone was lost or in need of directions. But I didn't hear a car pull up or see headlights in the window. We hadn't drawn the curtains yet. It didn't seem necessary considering we were the only house for miles. I crept over to the door, my hand bouncing off the handle, unsure whether to open it. "Ask who it is," Claire whispered. "Who is it?" I called. "Trick or treat?" sang a child's voice. Lauren gasped and started shaking. She turned pale and her breathing grew heavy. Claire rushed over to comfort her. When Lauren showed no signs of calming down, Claire helped her up and into the bedroom furthest from the door. The front door was solid wood with no peephole, so I pressed my face against a window beside the door. Sure enough, our visitors were children in Halloween costumes. 2 boys and a girl, from what I could tell. They were wearing old-fashioned gowns. I guessed they were meant to be characters from some period drama. I should have been relieved it was just kids, but I was experiencing an overbearing sense of dread that became more intense with every passing second. "How did you get here?" I asked, raising my voice to be heard through the door. "We got lost," the little girl answered. "Do you have a phone so we can call our parents? Please open the door. We think there's a bear." I turned to Claire as I heard her walk back into the room. "Don't let them in," she whispered urgently. This was unlike my wife. She loved kids. She was a teacher and we'd been desperately trying for a baby for over a year. "I have a really bad feeling," she added. I knew exactly what she meant. I also had a powerful yet inexplicable feeling that allowing the children inside would be a grave mistake. Claire screamed. I followed her gaze to the window. The children were there, staring in at us with eyes that were completely black. "It must be Halloween contacts, part of the costume," I said, quickly to reassure Claire. She had turned even paler than Lauren did after the knock. "Please, we can't come in without permission," the girl child begged. This sent chills down my spine. It seemed an odd thing to say. I pulled the curtains close on impulse, feeling slightly better once I couldn't see their haunting black eyes. But a sense of foreboding still pulsed under my skin. Claire grabbed her phone. "We can call the police to help them, but I don't think we should let them in or do anything ourselves. It might be a trap. The adults could be waiting to ambush us." "What adults?" "Whoever they're with. How else did they get here?" "Okay," I agreed. The cops arrived an hour later. It took a while for them to get out to us, due to our remote location, and they were busy with it being Halloween. The children were gone. The police swept the nearby woods but found no sign of them. We hoped they found their way home. I felt guilty for not letting them in, but I was also certain following my gut had been the right decision. I wouldn't have been so stressed at work if I had listened to my instincts about the nightmare client. Your gut might not always seem logical, but it's almost always right. There was something very wrong with those children. Claire made hot chocolate, with a generous splash of whiskey, after the police left, and we put the black-eyed children incident behind us. Even Lauren was in better spirits. She went to the car for a cigarette because the cabin had a strictly no-smoking policy. The owner had been adamant about that, and Claire didn't want to lose her 5-star rating if the smell of smoke lingered on the upholstery. It was chilly outside, with it being late night. I was hit by a bitter wind when Lauren opened the door. This must have been why she opted for the car over the porch, so she could put the heating on while she smoked. We all went to bed after she returned to the cabin. Claire said she wasn't sure she wanted to stay the second night we had booked. I understood her reluctance. The children had unsettled all of us, but I thought it was unlikely they'd return tomorrow. Claire wasn't convinced. I suggested we sleep on it and make a decision with Lauren in the morning. Claire was still sleeping when I woke up at 7 a.m. I decided to surprise her with breakfast in bed. I opened the curtains to see Lauren in the car again. Breakfast for 3 then. I located a saucepan and poured in some oil. I wandered over to the TV whilst I waited for it to heat, planning to turn it on quietly to catch the news. The route to the TV took me back past the window. Lauren was still in the car. Something seemed off. It took me a minute to realize she was in the exact same position she'd been in last time, and she hadn't moved in that minute either. I couldn't see the bright end of her cigarette or any smoke. So what was she doing out there? I hurried to my room, pulled on my trainers and jacket, and went out to the car. I opened the driver's door. Lauren still didn't move. She remained in the seat, statue still. I said her name, but she didn't look up. I touched her arm. Her skin was hard and cold. I knew she was dead, even before I tried and failed to find a pulse. I couldn't see any sign of injury on her body. There was no blood. I looked around for a pill bottle, wondering if she'd overdosed, but there was nothing. I tried to keep it together when I broke the news to Claire. I held her as she cried for her oldest friend. She was eventually calm enough for me to extract myself to go and call the police. As I reached for my phone, I noticed the car was empty. I ran outside and searched the nearby woods. Lauren's body was gone. The ominous feeling I experienced last night returned. Who would have taken her body? Did someone intend to harm Claire and me next? Maybe you were mistaken and she's alive, Claire speculated hopefully, tears of joy filling her eyes. No, honey. I'm sorry. I wasn't mistaken. Then where is she? That's when we saw the child. She wore a white nightdress and a teddy bear dangled from her left hand. Her eyes turned black the moment I broke direct eye contact. Claire grabbed my hand and pulled me back towards the cabin. We broke into a run and locked the door behind us. What's going on? I yelled, terror and confusion making an unpleasant cocktail in my mind. That was Lauren, Claire gasped. Where? The little girl. That was Lauren. I thought Claire must have been confused. The trauma of her best friend's death, confusing her. But she grew up with Lauren. She knew exactly what Lauren looked like as a child. I phoned the police. I didn't mention finding Lauren dead in the car because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me or would think me mad. We decided to say that she wasn't in her room when we woke up. It's now 3 weeks later, and her body still hasn't been found. Sometimes Claire seems to think she might turn up alive, but other times, she rants and raves about how Lauren must have gone to smoke in the car and let those black-eyed children in. I'm coming to terms with the fact we'll probably never know exactly what happened. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. A huge thank you to Tales for Endless Nights for writing this story for me to use. It was originally intended to be used on another channel's Halloween collaboration, but that got cancelled, so I thought I may as well use it on my channel. I hope you all enjoy it. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa